The train door slammed like a verdict, and the sound echoed down the empty platform as if the land itself had turned its back on her. She did not move. The paper in her hand trembled, not from the cold alone, though the wind cut sharp as a blade across the prairie and carried with it the smell of coal smoke and iron. Return to sender. The conductor had muttered without looking at her, as if she were a crate of spoiled goods. Her trunk sat beside her, still roped tight, still unopened, as though her life had never even been given the chance to begin. A stray dog watched from beneath the station bench, ribs showing, waiting to see if she would drop something worth taking. She did not cry. Not yet. The cold held her still. The silence did the rest. She had imagined a different sound when she came west. Laughter, perhaps. The creak of a door opening to a man who had been waiting. The steady rhythm of boots on wood as someone crossed the floor to greet her. Instead, there was only the whistle of the wind, slipping through the boards of the station house, and the distant rattle of the departing train shrinking into nothing, piling her grip on the paper until it crumpled in her hand. The ink had smeared where her thumb pressed too hard, but the words remained clear enough. Rejected. Not suitable. No explanation. No apology. Just a life undone in a single line. Stories like hers don't stay in one place. They travel. If this one has already reached you, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from, because I want to see exactly how far this has gone. The wind did not pause for such things. It pressed on, restless, like time itself, and she sat there as though rooted to the boards. Her name was Eliza Harrow, though no one on that platform knew it, and no one had asked. Names mattered less out here than work, and work she had not yet been given. Back east, her name had once been spoken with softness, by a mother who hummed while she mended dresses by lamplight, by a younger brother who used to chase her through narrow alleys with laughter that echoed like church bells. Those sounds had been buried under the weight of a single winter, a fever that took her mother first, slow and cruel, leaving behind the scent of medicine and damp cloth. Then her brother, quick and quiet, as though he had simply grown tired of the world. And her father did not die, not then. He simply folded inward, like a house left too long without care, until debts swallowed him whole, and the land they had once called theirs was signed away to a man who never even set foot on it. That man's name was Aldous Crane. She had not spoken it aloud since the morning she boarded the train east. She did not speak it now. But the shape of it sat behind her teeth like something she could not swallow. Eliza had learned something in that season of loss. That grief could hollow a person until there was nothing left but motion. And so she moved. She answered an advertisement, printed in small, careful letters. A rancher seeking a wife. Honest intentions. A chance at a new beginning. She packed what little remained of her life into a trunk and boarded a train that carried her farther west than she had ever imagined going. She had believed, not in the man exactly, but in the possibility of being needed again, of belonging somewhere that did not already feel like a grave. The wind shifted, carrying with it the distant sound of hooves against frozen ground. She did not look up at first. She had already learned how quickly hope could betray her. But the sound grew closer, steady and unhurried, until it stopped just beyond the edge of her vision. Leather creaked. A horse snorted, breath rising in white clouds against the gray sky. "You planning on staying there till spring?" the voice asked. It was low, rough-edged, as if it had not been used for conversation in some time. She looked up then. The man sat tall in the saddle, broad-shouldered, his coat worn but clean, his hat pulled low enough to shadow his eyes. There was nothing polished about him, no city refinement. Just the quiet solidity of someone who had spent his life working land that did not forgive mistakes. "I don't have anywhere else to go," she said, and the truth of it settled between them like dust. He studied her for a long moment, not her face alone, but the trunk at her side, the paper in her hand, the way she sat without moving as if the cold had claimed her bones. His gaze did not linger with curiosity or pity. It measured. It weighed. "Station master locked up an hour ago," he said finally. "No fire inside. You'll freeze if you stay." "I've known worse," she answered, though her fingers had already gone numb. He swung down from his horse in a single fluid motion, boots hitting the ground with a dull thud. Up close, he looked older than she had first thought. Not in years, perhaps, but in the way his eyes held a kind of distance that did not belong to youth. "Name's Caleb Mercer," he said. "Ranch is a mile east. Got a spare room that ain't being used." He paused, as if the next words did not come easily. "You can stay till you figure something out." "Why?" she asked. He glanced toward the tracks where the trank had vanished. "Because I know what it looks like when someone's got nowhere left to go," he said. The words were simple, no weight added, no attempt to soften them, and yet something in them struck deeper than any kindness she had been offered before. Not sympathy, recognition. She hesitated only a moment before nodding. The dog beneath the bench slunk away as Caleb lifted her trunk and secured it behind his saddle. He offered his hand, and she took it, the warmth of his grip startling against the cold that had settled into her skin. The ride to his ranch was quiet. The land stretched wide and unforgiving, broken only by fences that leaned under the weight of time and wind. His ranch came into view as the light began to fade. A small house, weathered but standing firm. A barn that leaned slightly to one side, but held its ground. Smoke curled faintly from the chimney, thin and uncertain, as if even the fire inside had learned not to expect too much. "Not much," Caleb said, as though reading her thoughts. "It's enough," she replied, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. And so it began. Not with promises or plans, just with work. The next morning came hard and early, the kind of cold that bit through layers and settled deep in the bones. Caleb handed her a pair of worn gloves and pointed toward the fence line. "Storm took half of it down last week," he said. "Cattle'll wander if it ain't fixed." She nodded, pulling the gloves on despite the way they hung loose around her fingers. The first post drove 2 inches before the frozen earth pushed back. The impact jarred her arms, sent a sharp sting up to her shoulders. She drove it again, and again. By midday, her hands were bleeding, where the wood had split against her palm. She did not say so. But Caleb saw it. He said nothing either, only set down his own tools, walked to the barn, and returned with a strip of clean cloth. "You don't have to do this," he said. It was the first time she had heard something that sounded almost like concern from him. "I know," she replied, and held out her hand so he could bind it. That small moment passed between them without ceremony, but something in it shifted. 3 days later, the real friction came. She had moved the mare to a different stall without asking. It had seemed obvious, given the animal's unease, and Caleb had come in from the Dart field to find things rearranged. His jaw tightened in a way she had not yet seen. "This isn't your barn," he said, low and flat. "You don't touch what you don't understand." Something hot moved through her. She had stitched her dignity back together out of nothing, and she would not have it unpicked now. "Then teach me," she said, "or stop expecting me to guess." The silence that followed was long. Caleb looked at her with that measuring gaze, the one she could never quite read. Then he turned away and said nothing more. But in the morning, when she came to the barn, there was a second lantern hung where it was easy to reach. And he showed her, without words, how the mare preferred her left side approached first. It was not an apology. But out here, she was learning. That was what apology looked like. In the evenings, a silence settled over Caleb that was different from the working quiet of the day. Thicker, older. It was in that stillness that his wound revealed itself, piece by piece, not through confession, but through absence. A second cup left unused on the table. A name carved faintly into the wood of the barn door, nearly weathered beyond recognition. A child's small wooden toy tucked high on a shelf, out of sight but never forgotten. A wife lost to fever. A son who followed before the ground had settled over her grave. Caleb had not spoken it, but the land had, and Eliza understood. not the details, but the shape of it. The hollow that remained when everything you loved fits into a single wooden toy. One night, she found him sitting at the table in the dark, not moving, not sleeping. She did not speak. She simply lit the lamp, set it between them, and stayed. After a long time, he said, "I don't know how to let someone stay without being afraid of what leaving costs." "I know something about that," she said. Nothing more was said. But neither of them moved for a long while. If you're still here, and something in this story is pressing against your chest, subscribe right now so you never miss what comes next on Desert Hearts Cinema. And tell me in the comments, would you have stayed? The man arrived just as the first real snow began to fall, 2 weeks after Eliza had come to the ranch. His coat was too fine for the land, his boots too clean. He did not dismount immediately, choosing instead to look over the property as though assessing something he had already decided belonged to him. Eliza recognized him before he spoke. Aldous Crane, older now, heavier in the jaw, but the same small eyes that had looked through her father as though he were already gone. "Caleb Mercer," he called out, voice carrying the practiced ease of a man who had never been told no in a room that mattered. "I've come regarding the deed to this property. It seems there was a discrepancy, one that grants me legal claim to this land." Caleb stepped forward, his posture shifting into a stillness that was more dangerous than movement. "That matter's settled," Caleb said. Crane's thin smile did not waver, not according to my documents. His gaze drifted then and found Eliza. Something passed across his face, recognition and then the quick burial of it. "Well," he said softly, "the Harrow girl." Caleb turned to look at her. She kept her face still. "You two know each other?" Caleb asked. "He took my family's land," she said, "when my father was too broken to fight him." Crane spread his hands in a gesture of theatrical innocence. "Business, my dear, nothing personal. Though I must say, it seems you have a gift for finding yourself on land that isn't yours." The cold between them deepened into something else entirely. Crane left that evening, but he did not go far. The threat unfolded across the following days in the language of law. Documents, signatures, riders sent to town with sealed letters. Quiet pressure applied to men whose goodwill Caleb depended on. 3 days after Crane's visit, Eliza found the fence line cut, a full section, cleanly, deliberately. The cattle were not yet lost, but they would be by morning if it wasn't repaired. She drove the posts herself in the dark, by lantern light, her breath coming in sharp white bursts, hands aching inside gloves that were never quite warm enough. Caleb found her still working when he came out at midnight, alerted by the cattle's noise. He said nothing. He picked up a post and drove it beside hers. When the fence was mended and the cattle settled, he said, "He'll come at the water next, or the barn. Then we move faster than he does," she said. But the pressure was not only physical. A letter arrived for Caleb, formal, sealed, citing a clause in his original deed that had been written with the deliberate ambiguity of a trap set years in advance. It named a debt owed to a land company. It gave him 30 days. That night was the only time she saw something close to despair move through him. "I've been fighting this since my wife died," he said. He circled for 2 years before he made his move. "He knew I'd be tired." "He didn't know I'd be here," Eliza said. Caleb looked at her across the table in the lamplight. "Why does it matter to you? This isn't your fight." She thought of her father's land, of the documents signed in a cold room while her father stared at the floor, of the way Crane had looked through her just as he had looked through her father, as if people without power were simply furniture. "It became my fight," she said, "the moment he looked at me like I wasn't there." Caleb rode into town the next morning. Eliza stayed behind, keeping the ranch running, refusing to let it show weakness. But she did not wait passively. She went door to door herself, the blacksmith, the general store, the widow who kept careful records of every transaction in the county for 30 years. She did not beg. She presented facts. She asked questions. And she listened. truly listened, in the way she had learned to listen since the train, since the cold, since the months of working soil that did not yield easily. The community had watched Crane's methods before. They had seen other ranchers fold. They had stayed silent out of self-protection, and the accumulated cost of that silence sat in their chests like old stone. A neighbor arrived at the ranch with spare lumber. The blacksmith rode out to make repairs without charge. The station master, the same man who had locked his doors without a second thought the day she arrived, brought word of a clerk willing to testify about the original deed. And the widow produced, from a locked box she had not opened in 11 years, a letter that contradicted every clause Crane's document claimed. They had not given this help out of charity. Eliza understood that. They had given it because she had shown them, quietly and without theater, that someone was finally willing to stand. Tell me in the comments, what moment hit you hardest? And you're watching Desert Hearts Cinema, where every story is worth staying until the very last word. The confrontation came in the center of town, beneath a sky pressing white with the weight of coming snow, papers laid out on a table. Voices raised not in anger, but in the precision of competing truths. Crane arrived with two men, whose presence was designed to communicate what law could not directly threaten. He looked at the assembled faces with the expression of a man who has never lost and cannot yet locate his doubt. Then the widow's letter was placed on the table. Crane looked at it for a long time. The expression that passed across his face was not anger. It was the particular blankness of a man watching something he built with careful patience begin, unmistakably, to fall. His legal authority collapsed, not in the moment, but in a slow, inevitable breaking. Each document answered with another. Each claim met with a witness. His two hired men shifted on their feet and did not meet anyone's eyes. Before it was finished, Crane looked at Eliza across the table. "Your father sent his regards, I suppose," he said, "and it was the last cruelty a man reaches for when he has nothing else." "My father taught me to read a deed," she replied. "That's enough." Crane left without ceremony, without apology. The snow swallowed his tracks before he reached the edge of town. The silence that followed felt different. Not empty. Full. Caleb stood beside Eliza as the crowd began to thin, the cold settling back around them like something ordinary. The weight of the past 2 weeks loosened its grip, just enough for something else to take hold. "I ain't losing this," he had said during the worst of it. "Not again." "You won't," she had replied. "Not alone." It had not been a declaration of love. Not yet. But it had been something stronger. A promise made in the language they both understood. Now, walking back through the snow toward the horses, Caleb said simply, "I don't want you to leave." She exhaled slowly, feeling something shift inside her that she had not allowed to move since before the train, before the letter, before everything that had brought her here. "I wasn't planning to," she answered. And that was all it needed to be. Years later, the ranch stood stronger than it ever had before. The fences held firm against the wind. The barn no longer leaned. Children's laughter crossed the fields where silence had once settled too easily, and a dog, well-fed, unhurried, lay across the porch steps in the afternoon sun. Eliza was watching from the porch when she heard it. The sound she had learned to read before any other sound the land made. A train. She set down her mending and walked the mile to the station, something she had not done since the day she arrived. The platform was quiet as she remembered it. The same boards, the same lean of the eave against the sky. The train exhaled its final breath of steam and went still. A woman stepped onto the platform. Young, her coat too light for the season, a trunk at her side, still roped tight, still unopened. A piece of paper in her hand that she was trying very hard not to look at. She did not cry. The cold held her still. And a stray dog watched from beneath the station bench, waiting to see if she would drop something worth taking. Eliza crossed the platform without hesitation. "The station master locks up in an hour," she said. "No fire inside. The woman looked up. Her eyes held the particular blankness of someone trying to hide how close they were to breaking. "I don't have anywhere else to go," she said. Eliza nodded once, the way Caleb had nodded at her all those years ago. Not with pity, but with recognition. "I know," she said. "Come with me." Winter still came. The wind still howled across the land, but it no longer carried emptiness. Far off in the distance, the train whistle sounded, faint and fleeting, already moving on to somewhere else. This time, no one turned away.